what in the world is Neon Tetra? What in the world is that? Oh man. Well, brother, I tell you what, I've been extremely encouraged by this album, like
It's cool.
always. Uh, I feel that God gave me a really significant purpose to keep harassing you, asking you when the projects are going to be done,
Yeah.
because I know that it will help complete my joy.
Hey.
But it's awesome. I'm just super excited about this project. But I think the biggest question that I've been even been asked by like friends and family is, what in the world is Neon Tetra? What in the world is that?
Yeah. Um, yeah, so that is the big question that people are asking me as well. Or like, why is there a fish on your album cover? Um, so it's kind of so basically a neon tetra is it's a small freshwater fish that I think is mainly in like the Amazon region, but you'll find it in a lot of aquariums and stuff. So my housemate has them in his aquarium, and that's kind of where I was first introduced to this fish.
Oh wow.
And I think he has a lot of different fish, but they just stood out to me because of how beautiful they are. Um, and the fact that they have this like light stripe down the
Mm,
middle of them that like reflects the light. And so even just the inspiration behind like why naming the album after that, it's kind of threefold. One is that they like reflect the light, sort of like a Christ as a Christian, reflects the light of Christ. There's like the metaphor there. Two is they're like a really tiny fish that by themselves maybe they seem insignificant even though there's beauty there. But like when you
oh,
see them together as a school, it's just like this beautiful mass of just color and light, and uh, so in that way, also reflecting the beauty of the church being together,
yeah.
and how we reflect the light of Christ embedded together. And then in a larger sense, to kind of like along a more timeless theme, is just that the ichthys or the what we call the Jesus fish,
Yeah.
right, has been like a symbol of Christianity for a long time, since like the early
Yeah.
church. And
Ancient, yeah.
so, yeah, and so considering that the album was like exploring themes of Christian experience, it seemed fitting to, yeah, to tie all
Oh
that together.
man. That's awesome. And you got all of that from a little tiny fish that your
Yeah,
roommate had. Look at
yeah,
God. Look at
yeah,
God. God tells stories. That's awesome. That's awesome. So I guess that explains how it relates to the project. So I think specifically when thinking about kind of the three different things that you communicated, is there, when you think about that track list, it seems to be, in my mind,
mm-hmm,
a whole message kind of going through that. Like it seems like it starts really, um I don't even know, even with Cornerstone, it seems like an exposure to the gospel maybe or something like
hmm.
that. But then, City of Sin, giving me this whole Pilgrim's Progress picture thing, and then you have all these different songs that, as you just said, seems to be showing different aspects of the Christian life. Um, so if it is different aspects of the Christian life, with your track list, did you have something in mind to communicate with that track list?
Yeah, yeah. So, um, process wise, even with how I generally write, this might help get at that
Mm,
a little bit. Is I just write for the most part. Most of the music I make, I just write as it comes to me, like as an
mm-hmm,
idea comes to me, and then I'll like file that away, and I have different project ideas, And so I just filter them into like, oh, these all seem to have like this similar theme, so I'll like put them in a certain um, kind of project folder. And so it's yeah, that being said, like I had amassed like a bunch of different songs within this project folder of Neon Tetra, and it started with just Cornerstone and City of Sin. I
Oh
just knew
wow.
like these were going to be the first two songs in this album, um, and then I have, and these aren't like fully fleshed out ideas in the sense of like they're not all full songs, but I had about
Hmm.
230 song ideas that had got
Nice.
filtered into that. And so just yeah, and so it's like cutting that down from 230 to 130 to 89 to
Right.
33 and then being like I want 14 songs. And then having to cut that down to like okay, these are the 14. And then after that, then it became like okay, how do I arrange these in a way that tells a clear narrative?
Mm,
Um and so it begins with this like zoomed out picture of sort of the voice of the church, like we've only just begun, and soon the end
yes.
will come. And you know, our history is about 2,000 years old, and like it seems like a long time, but in the span of things, like it's um, sort of short. Like we've just begun, and soon the end will come. Soon Christ will return, and so it's like getting at these bigger themes. Cornerstone speaks on like this bigger theme. City of Sin then like zooms into the like here and now place that we're living in, this city of sin, this world of uh, this present age of depravity and
Yeah.
darkness. And so it's describing that. And then from there, it goes to Is It Hard, which just gives you, it's kind of like the sigh of the album.
Yeah.
It's asking this rhetorical question, is it hard, that gives you permission to say yes. Like, yes, it is hard to be a Christian in this dark world with my own sin and with, you know, just the darkness around us. And then from there, the middle of the album is, you know, different aspects of
Yeah.
that Christian experience of like going from it's hard to like, but the love of Christ is light and
Yeah.
it lifted the burden of sin off of me. Um, but then going into if it wasn't for you, where it's like, yeah, but I also experienced the difficulty of seeking the Lord as I feel like I
Mm,
ought to. And then it goes, you know, the last words of those of that song, the last words of if it wasn't for you is please free me. And then it goes from
right.
that into free indeed to
Yes.
say that like I've been
Yes.
saved and I'm not a slave of sin. And then Swedish Fish, and it's you know, just the sweetness of knowing the Lord. And so then you get a lot of this like present experience, which both the sour and the sweet, both the difficulty and the hope and the joy that we have. And then from there, after Swedish Fish, well, there's also Church, which that
Right.
song is a part of that. We're experiencing this together. But then after that, it goes to more of a sequential like death, resurrection,
Yeah.
and glory in the new
Right.
heavens and new earth. So that's sort of the flow of
Yeah. I
the
loved it.
project.
I loved it. I loved it so much. Like I was sitting with different friends, making sermons out of the whole thing. It was like, you begin and you see this world of sin, and it's like you can think freely, but they pay no mind. Can we say it? Can we call it a bar? Yeah, that's a bar. But it's just like looking at society, looking at us, looking at this, looking at that, and then you go into the just this how do you say Swedish fish and terrified and how do you do all this at the same time? And it's like all of that is wrapped up in the coming hope that we have. And so once you went from when you went to once the church song started, I was like, oh, like you are taking our eyes and saying like together as a church look forward.
Yeah.
Like, not only are you free indeed, all of these free indeed, these people that are free indeed are taking their eyes and looking to the glory. And then the next song, boom, boom, boom. And then just the way you use the drums in all the last two songs. I don't even want to go that far yet because I'm going to start fangirling. So I'm gonna kind of try to tone it back a little bit. So I'm just trying to think, how in the world does Nate Emmanuel go through this process, writing these songs, thinking all these songs and putting them together during a pandemic and not just putting out "Is It Hard?" You get what I'm saying? Like, to me, I would think if I had to do a project or any album or whatever that had any kind of substance, sorry, thinking
No,
through
you're
that
good.
thinking through that during a pandemic, during a time where you're even showing as the Neon Tetra, being tiny and, by itself with the sense of being alone and different things like that. How in the world did you write and actually get through to come out with this project during all this chaos?
Yeah. Um, Actually, the pandemic was really helpful for working on the album
Yeah,
because, especially during the beginning, like, we a lot of people's lives slow down, and
right.
so it gave time for me to reassess and look at like how much work I could put into
Mm,
the project, and it just called for me to like think through what are my priorities and how do I order them in a way that like you know allows me to do this. And because there's just a lot less things on the calendar initially, like it was quite a bit easier to focus on it. As far as the writing of it, I actually like the Foreigners EP was my first project. It was my first release, but
mm,
I had started writing Cornerstone before that release, and that was like back in 2016 when it released. I think Cornerstone
wow.
I started writing in 2015, City of Sin in like 2016, and so it's actually been, I guess, even to give some background on the order of the projects. Like as I was finishing Foreigners, I was getting ideas for Neon Tetra, and that was in my mind the next move was to make a full length album.
Mm,
But the thing was, like in Foreigners, I bought production off from other people and I wrote to it. But now I have all these song ideas swirling in my head, and it's like, how am I gonna produce these? Like I don't
yeah,
know how to produce. And
right.
so what happened was I decided, okay, like I want to learn how to start producing music, and so I told myself I'm gonna do like a single per month, like a little challenge to myself. Like I started in GarageBand, and then I bought Logic, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna, several months in a row, like make a single each month. And then that's when Matt, our mutual friend Matt Speaks, like
Yeah.
we were both talking about it, and so we both decided to do the same thing just to like sharpen our production skills. And out of that came Unraveling. So Unraveling was
Yes.
kind of an unplanned project, but it was my like dabbling in production, kind of fumbling into figuring out, okay, how does this work? And so after Unraveling was done and I was thinking about what's next and praying about it, um, what's interesting is like in Unraveling, I felt like I found my sound,
Yeah.
but then Neon Tetra was the concepts were older. It was like this is the sound before I found my sound, which I
Right.
like it, but it's not where I see myself going. So I wrestled with that and prayed about it, and it was like, but this is the direction that's clear to me. Like
Right.
this was the
Right.
plan, and I don't have another clear direction on where I would take that. And so I essentially went backwards and was like, all right, I'm going back to do this album. This is the reason why I tried to learn how to produce anyways.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but
No,
like
that's
how
good. Yeah. That's good. Like, I love it. I
I
was
guess
yeah,
also like
because
another
okay.
like details like so released Unraveling in 2018. In 2019, I released Come My Way, and then it was
Mm,
November of 2019 that I started to work on the project. Unraveling was mostly done in my bedroom. Some of it was recorded at Matt's house,
yeah.
in down there in North Carolina with you guys. And with Neon Tetra, I I just decided to ask my church, like, hey, is there a room? you know, I knew there was a room in our basement that was small, like this like utility closet that I thought didn't get much use. And so I asked like, hey, like, is there any? Can I just like use that room to like produce in and like as a little studio room? And they told me, like the elders told me that actually the school that meets in our church, they do use
Mm,
that room, but there's this upstairs Sunday school room that we're not using. And so I ended up getting a bigger room, which I felt like, wow, this is more space than I need. This is like this is where I'm at now. But it was a blessing. So yeah, that was November of 2019. That's when I started on the project, and then December of 2021 is when I finished. So it's about a little over 2 years working on it.
wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. I like how you answered it too, because that answered like four different questions that I was thinking about. So that really, especially when I was thinking about kind of like the I guess what we call it, a discography,
hmm
when it came to the projects, because it did feel like, Foreigners is, I'm gonna give you these bars real quick. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna give you these bars, and then Unraveling is, I'm getting a lot more singing and these catchy uh, hooks and different things like that other people can sing along and things like that. But then you can still hear the like these like experimental sounds and stuff like that. So I was interested to see, what was gonna be your goal, I guess technically, or in your sound for Neon Tetra. So, like, you
hmm
answered all of that, and so that really helps. Oh, I'm sorry. You got it.
Poor
Productive
girl.
cough. Yeah. Um. Don't wake up. Stay asleep. Okay. Uh. So I was just trying to make sure I wasn't overthinking. Okay,
Okay.
because I have a tendency to do that. But Cornerstone, the way it ends, you said, so they say to me, but say so they say to me, but say to me no more. He who made the keys should make us see the door. But I've got faith to see, no fantasy, no lore. I will wait to see the Lord, he who faithfully rewards. And so the main thing that I caught was, I've got faith to see, no fantasy, no lore.
Uh-huh.
Right? And then boom, City of Sin happens. Right? And the
Uh-huh.
reason why I call this overthinking is, just follow me for a second.
Okay.
Okay, so you're saying you got faith to see, no lore. City of Sin sounds happy. Like, City of Sin sounds like, if I'm looking at it like this fun circus, but you have faith to see no lore. Like, you don't see any of the, you don't see this as glamorous. You don't see this as fun as it sounds. It's actually
Mm.
terrible.
hmm
Am I doing too much with that, or were you thinking like that?
Yeah, I wasn't as much no, I wasn't as much trying to make that connection. I think it's more so that section of Cornerstone is kind of getting at the friction of between us as the church and the world. And is
Ah,
there's just
okay.
this, so they say to me, but say to me no more. Like, don't say it to me anymore. He who made the key should make us see the door. And that's just like, that's in quotes, right? That they're
Right,
saying,
right.
and we experience this where people are like, oh, well, if Jesus is away, then God just needs to show me. He needs to make it clear. And it's like he has made it clear. He's made
He
it
has made it
apparent
clear.
in his word, and it's it's upon us to believe. Like that's ultimately what he's called us to. But it's actually opposing faith with fantasy in the sense of saying
Mm.
that you want, like, make us see the door, and I'm saying, but I've got faith to see, no fantasy nor lore. Like
Ah,
this isn't a fantasy. This isn't a,
right.
like it says in the scriptures. We didn't follow cleverly devised fables.
Yeah,
Like
right.
this is the
Absolutely.
truth. This is the truth attested to us by eyewitnesses and those who followed him, and we've also seen it bear fruit in our own lives to bring us from death to life. And so, um, the whole thing that walking by faith and not by sight is not fantasy. It's 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 trusting in God and waiting to see Him. Like at the end of the day, like with all this taunting, it's like, but I'll wait to
Hmm.
see the Lord, He who faithfully rewards. Um, like in the end, we'll see. Um,
Yeah,
but as a Christian now, it's like we already see, as Christians, we already see by faith
I already see it. Yeah.
that truth. So
Yeah. That's awesome. Oh my goodness. Okay. That's even because then that now I feel like I want to listen to Cornerstone and then go straight to Eternally because you just told me that.
mm.
Because it's like you're setting me up, Nate. Why are you doing that? Like that's awesome. Um, so I have a question about the collaborations.
Okay.
Um, like where were those kids? Was that like a sound? I'm trying to think which when you had kind of like the chorus behind it, like that sounded awesome. You had two different songs where you had people singing with you behind you. Um,
So on church, and this was meaningful to me. Like I had I'd asked women from my church to like sing with me. And
yeah,
so it's meaningful because it's like, man, this is a song about the importance and the beauty of God's bride, of
yeah,
of his children gathered together. And so it was meaningful for me to say like I want to have people from my local body
yeah,
in that, and then and we recorded it in the church too in our main hall, which is cool because this room I just didn't want. I recorded other like group vocals in here for the album, but I wanted church to have this bigger sound, and so I went to our main hall and like it sounded really good. Um, so yeah, there was that, and then yeah, I mean the album in general, it's like as far as like collaboration, like I wanted it to be friends and people that I know and whose faith and whose walk I know because it just like it was so pertinent, I think, even to the message and the purpose of the album that like, ah man, I got together and like we did this together. Like my brothers, my sisters,
yeah.
whom I know and do life with. It made it even more meaningful. And so on We Will All Rise, we did that in this room, just a
Yes,
bunch of friends from church. And then also on the outro song, One Day Soon, we did that
yeah.
in here too. Again, just like friends from church. Um,
That
yeah.
feels like that's gonna be like a thing. Your outro songs are always gonna have more people in it, and
Yeah.
I love it. 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 I'm
Yeah.
not saying that's what you're doing, but I just that seems to be from the last other projects. That seems like that's how you like to end.
It was significant on Foreigners for me to do that in a similar way of like, man, I wanted everybody who touched the Foreigners EP to like have their voice in there.
Hmm.
And so yeah, from like Jerry to Courtney to Ashley, to Matt, like and myself, like and so this was sort of a similar thing of like there's a lot of individual creativity, but like there's like the beauty of what God used us to like make together. and I want to have that represented in our voices together.
Beautiful. Which Neon Tetras shine
Yeah.
together. Bro, you're
Yes.
a genius. I
I
love
was.
art. That's awesome. Um, there has been one question with when Faithful died.
Uh-huh.
What's the story with that one? Because that one, even for me, I was kind of like, is this about like a cloud of witnesses? Is it about the saints? Is it about
Mm.
like Jesus and he was faithful? Like, so what's the story with when Faithful died?
Yeah. So you alluded earlier to Pilgrim's Progress, which
Okay,
this song is a nod to that. And what's interesting is like City of Sin feels like a nod to that as well, to
hmm,
Vanity Fair. And like other people picked that up and talked about that later. And I think at some point I realized it too. But when I had first written or started writing like City of Sin, I actually hadn't read Pilgrim's Progress. I
gotcha.
I probably read it like a year or two later. Interestingly enough, I just happened to be like, man, I need to read this book. Um, and but it very much feels like Vanity Fair. And so that was cool the way that worked out. When Faithful died, so yeah, this would have been like after I read Pilgrim's Progress. Um, just the sentiment of, watching a faithful believer pass on to glory, and like the sadness of
Mm,
that and the joy of that, and kind of a that mournful crying, or
yeah.
and that happy or hopeful crying. And so when Christian and his companion Faithful go to Vanity Fair, they're persecuted and locked up, and Faithful, after giving, a faithful witness of the truth, um, is sentenced to death, and they kill him. And Christian watches him be taken up to heaven. And so
Wow.
it's this picture, or the celestial city in the book. And so it's this picture of like, man, I remember when Faithful died, I could cry. Oh, but when I saw Faithful fly, I could cry.
Right.
And so you get these like tears, both of sadness and of hope. Um, yeah.
Oh man. Okay.
And so Faithful, the character in the book, as I think he does in the book, like he kind of generalizes kind of a greater characteristic of like a faithful believer. And so it's sort of a way in which you're applying that to just like as we watch our fellow believers go on to glory.
Hmm.
This song represents some of the sentiment behind that, which I wrestled with honestly at first. Like the first part of it, right? It's just vocals that are like
Right.
mad reverby and like with delay and all this stuff, and you get a little bit more of that sadness, and then the I don't know how you can say how you feel about it. I'd be interested to know. Like, but then once all of the like beat comes in, it's just like I was just like experimenting and trying all this crazy stuff that
Yeah.
to me was fun, and I wrestled with it, and I was like, like should I leave all that in? Does that take away from the emotion of the song? And I ultimately decided to leave it all in. Um, yeah, because it was creatively fun, and I think it like expressed. I was expressing myself, but also because I think the first part of the song where it's just sung with just vocals kind of ushers you into that like sadness part of
Right.
it. And I don't
Yeah.
think the latter half of it is making it sound happy necessarily, but it does feel a little bit more peppy, like as if like is this supposed to give me the stank face or something
Right.
when
Right. Right. Yeah.
when I thought I was supposed to be sad, so I wrestled with that a bit, but ultimately felt like the first half of it I think carried you into that, like recognizing the somberness of it, before it just became also like a creative expression of like I'm gonna I didn't I when I come back after the metronome comes in and it's like do do
Yeah.
do, all I did was copy and paste the singing from the first part over to the second part, and then I split some harmonies over it, and then I just started creating and like making a beat over that. That yeah, just became like a creative way to like to say the same thing with all these interesting elements behind it.
Yeah. I thought it was cool because like I said, I didn't know who Faithful was or anything like that, but I could still feel in the song that it's like, okay, so there's this message you're remembering. Remembering is usually good.
Mm,
And it was giving me a City of Sin vibe in the
mm,
sense of not necessarily like I'm supposed to be happy, kind of like that, but it made me feel hopeful. And because the sounds kind of echoed or different things like that, it made me start feeling like there are more voices because I'm still thinking church minded. I'm still thinking
mm,
Neon Tetra. I'm still thinking school. So and the sounds are usually going from like a lower part to a higher part. And
mm,
so when I was hearing I was thinking like your emotions.
mm.
Like you could cry, maybe you shouldn't, maybe you should. It's you're gonna experience all those emotions. So that's kind of where I was at. So yeah, like
Yeah, that's interesting because I think the production does like it's kind of all over the place a little bit,
yeah,
which I think does reflect. There's some like shocking sounds, like it just you think you know the beat, like you're getting used to it, and then it just comes in like and you're
yeah,
just like what is that?
yeah,
And it's just what's like I do think the like the high pitched echo in the background that's like faithful, faithful, like that part.
right,
I feel that like that it feels sad, but
right,
then you kind of have these like emotions of like like surprise and like these like different elements that surprise you that I think do kind of make you feel that swarm of emotion around like that it's just kind of a mix of feelings
yeah.
when yeah things like that happen. So
I think that was executed like perfectly
one of
because
my favorite
you get the same. Oh, go ahead.
sorry go ahead, you get the same one.
Oh no, I was just saying because you can still get you can get that same vibe with Terrified. It's just
Mm,
you get the same vibe at the same time with the words because I had to pay attention. And it's like
yeah,
you started Terrified, and I think I might be terrified. It's like, are you? What are we doing here? And it's just
uh-huh,
like we do this process of how we interact with being terrified or feeling despair or anything like that. And so once again, but you did. I feel like you did it more with the lyrics in that one.
yeah,
But I was like, man, this dude is really, really trying to give me the Christian life right now, like because of
hmm.
the way you were doing the song. But that might take you away from your thought. What were you saying?
No, I think that does get at it. Like, man, like how can I like I want to feel what I'm saying and to use the music
Mm-hmm.
to communicate that, which is one of the reasons why like in several songs I'll use like drops, like I'll drop out like is it hard? There's a part where, there's all these harmonized vocals and I say is it hard and it just drops out to one voice to where you just feel a little bit of that
Mm-hmm.
loneliness and so similarly um in when Faithful died, there's a part where I'm repeating "I could cry," where everything drops and you just hear my voice like "I could cry," and like
Yeah.
I'd probably did that like 15 times, like trying to get the right feeling of like I want to sound like sad, and then in the background I did this like breathing in, like when you're crying and you're like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you hear that in the background, and I wanted that. Like I told David, like mixing engineer, to like I want that louder. I want people to feel that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mission
definitely,
accomplished.
yeah, wanted that.
My son said, "Dad, is he sad? What's wrong with Nate?" It was so good. He's
That's
like, "I could
mission
cry."
accomplished.
Yeah.
He got it.
Mission
Yeah.
accomplished. It was great. I was like, "Oh, buddy, he's hopeful." Um, what is? And this might be hard. What is your favorite song?
I think I would say right now it's City of Sin,
Okay.
and maybe that will change. I think during the production process, We Will All Rise was probably one of my favorites just because of like how much energy it just like brought. Um, but having completed everything, I've kind of felt somewhat this way since the beginning, but having completed everything and just like City of Sin, I think from a writing standpoint, it feels like my best writing on the project.
Mm,
And but connected to that, it's not just a technical thing, it's also just like an emotional communicative thing, like in its effectiveness in communicating. It is one of the most gut punch like songs on the album. Like the way that it communicates, it's just like like it hits you. And so um, I think because of that, it's currently my favorite song. Um,
I don't blame you. Like the storytelling, the imagery, all of that, and just even just the performing it, like to sing it and ah, it's just that's a good one. That's hard. That's
yeah.
hard. I'm glad that you actually had that one ready to go because I was like, that might be. I maybe shouldn't ask that, but
No, I think
like
a,
that's a
a,
good one.
another like little tidbit is like City of Sin, like when I made it, it definitely was not my favorite production, like my favorite song production wise. Like at the end of
Hmm.
it, I had to be like, I give it my best. It is what it is. But now, like I appreciate it more. But one of the fun things production wise, uh, like during this whole time of like I've still been like trying to learn how to produce more, and so like watching a ton of videos. And I watched this YouTube video by a guy named Andrew Huang who makes production videos on YouTube,
Yeah.
um, and one of them he featured this Google artificial intelligence like web program that basically takes whatever audio you feed into it and it uses AI to model it into sounding like these various other instruments. And so they've got
Oh
like
wow.
a flute, a trumpet, a violin. And so like you could like hum a song, right? And put it into this program and it comes out um, with that same audio being fed in a way that they model it to sound like a saxophone. And I when I saw that I
Wow.
was like, I I have to use that in a song at some point. It's like I don't know where,
Yeah.
but I have to use it. And so I ended up using it in City of Sin. And in the end, the musical outro part where the horns come in, that was actually made that was all made with my voice.
Oh, see, that's awesome.
And so I was in the
Okay, that's
mic doing
awesome.
like, you know, 10, 15 takes or whatever of ba 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 da ba da ba da ba da ba da, and then I was like pitch correcting that and then uploading it into the software one by one, each take to like layer them, and then it's putting them out as trumpets. And then I put some effects on it to make it sound a little bit older. But that was like a production wise, even though it's not like the craziest song production wise, it that was something that was a unique experience that I felt like, man, that was fun, that was different.
That's
That's
awesome.
something that people probably won't know from listening to it. Um,
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, do you think that you met all of your, uh, as far as for this project, did you get to reach all of your artistic goals, if you will, with Neon Tetra in the sense of, or even did you have any? Like, because it seems like
mm,
after your last project, it's like, okay, we clearly now know that Nate sings, Nate falsettos like our boss, and he can give some bars. So that's Nate's sound. Was it since you knew that was your sound, you created some kind of goals or whatever with Neon Tetra,
huh.
or did you not at all? You're just expressing it.
That's a great question. Um, did I meet my creative goal? I think it was something that I, rather than a I think my creative goal was just to give it my best
Yeah,
and to for each song on an individual song level for each song to find the sound for that song. And I think where I'm at with this project in particular, musically it's obviously there's like similarities that carry through that I think you can tell it's my sound, but there's a lot of different sounds in there. And I just think as I approached each song, it was just like what I do sonically with this has to match the vision of this song. And like I'm like, it's like a hunt to find the sound. Um,
yeah,
yeah, when I start a song, I'm like hunting for a feeling and like trying to meet that. And I think for the most part, yeah, like it hit that. I mean, there's definitely, songs that you get to the end of it and you're like, ah, man, like I feel like I'm really close to it, but I don't know if I'm like 95%, but there's 5% missing and I don't know how to like
mm,
get get to that 100%. And it's not just like that I need it's like hunting for something that like satisfies like what I have envisioned. And that's always hard because basically it's like a cloud in your head. And you're like, man,
right,
how do you box a cloud? Like how to it's like until you until you start making sounds, it's all just kind of floaty. And you might
yeah,
feel like you have a concrete vision, and it might be somewhat, the cloud might be kind of boxy shaped, but it's not totally defined. And then as you um, get into making actual sound, is where you begin the sculpting and like trying to make that idea concrete. And you're asking yourself, what am I trying to do again? Like when I put this bell in here and I'm like, nope, that bell's not supposed to be in there. Why is it not? It's just not. Because it
don't sound
doesn't
right. Yeah,
match the
made my ear
the
feel
sound
weird.
or the vision. So yeah, I think the creative goal thing was more so on a song by song basis of like giving it my best to match the vision that's in my head. And sometimes that vision would change. Um, but for the most part, we each, with each song, it felt like it got where it needed to be. Of course, by the end of the album, there's a couple of them where it's just like, I didn't feel like it quite got where I wanted it to be. But then over time, you kind of forget that, and the song
Yeah,
becomes what it is, and
what it is.
then
Yeah,
you're like thankful for what it is, not just what it could have been.
that's awesome, dude. That's encouraging. That's like, especially for anybody to make music to, because it sounds like you're even saying like even once you have the song, you may still feel like you don't have it all figured out, but you just gotta kind of like just trust and let the sound and let the song be the song,
Mm-hmm.
which I guess is super helpful if you have a message behind it, because then you could be like, I'm trying to be faithful to your word, to be faithful to your message and to God's people. So then there gives me this room to be creative and just let it be out there. Don't the
Mm-hmm.
bell might be there. I might have missed it or something. But you know, 2 years from now, you're not gonna be like that daggum bell. Like you can be like, yeah, that bell. I'm glad it's there. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. That's super awesome. Um, okay, so if you take Neon Tetra,
Mm-hmm.
it's the whole package, right? And you already said the things that you were trying to communicate and everything. What would you say you would want the listener to walk away saying Neon Tetra? Like, so Neon Tetra is,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I think what may be difficult in answering that is I don't know if I think as much about what I want them to walk away saying as what I want them to walk away feeling.
ooh,
And
okay,
so that's a part of why there's, you know, in the narrative and in the storytelling in the music, why there's like just like instrumental parts too. Kind of like in unraveling, it starts with a instrumental that for me, like, yeah, like
Yeah.
I think maybe people can hear that and be like, why are there no words on that song? Or, or like, like, oh, that's a cool beat. But for me, uh, it was introducing you to this story. And so, similar with this album, I've said a lot. And then by the time you get to the One Day Soon outro, it's like you're supposed to feel something after all that's been
Yeah.
said. After Eternally, where you felt this tension of like, hope is coming, like it's close. One day, um, we'll see new life, and but then after all that feeling, and then bringing you to the height of the end of that song, there's this song that is just there's no lyrics on it, but it's supposed to feel like this hopeful, like, oh yeah, that one day is coming soon. Um, and so yeah, I think I'm seeking to speak truths, and in each of the songs respectively has a particular message to walk away with. But as a whole, I think I'm more so I've probably thought about like how I want you to feel. And
Mm,
I think in the end it's like victorious hope
victorious hope.
in the midst of, yeah, I mean, on the that's one of the ironic things about the cover for me that um has been on my mind for a long time since the idea came to me. It's like a part of the beauty that I explained to you was how beautiful um, the Neon Tetras are together, right? But on the front, it's just one. It's kind of lonely, and
Right.
like I went through all sorts of visual iterations of like I almost like one idea I had was to draw it kind of like on a wooden chopping block,
Oh my
where
God.
where it's like it can, but it's still the symbol. It still is what it is. It's still that beautiful fish
Right.
that reflects the light. And as you dig into the album, you get the greater hope that's beyond what you see just on the cover and like seeing one of them. And so, um, yeah, I think I, in a sense, it captures both. Like you see, like the one lone fish, but there's also like it's still that beautiful fish that reflects the light. And similarly, like throughout the album, like I touch on the difficulty of the Christian life, but
Yeah.
there's still that hope of that we are the saints of God, and He does reflect His glory in us, and we have a sure hope, like it's victorious. And I think that just like the last few songs of the album are like trying to nail that home, like there's victory in the
Oh
end
yeah.
for Christ and for His bride. So,
Those drums and trumpets declare that it's you bringing something home.
mm.
Like when you have that thing, like I had to mess with my sound system a little bit too because I was like, I want that to come through rich. I want that to come through my speakers hard. It's like when it's like, we will all rise. It's like, oh yeah, we will,
uh,
and he meant it. He meant it.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, man. I'm really glad to be able to talk to you about this album. It's been so refreshing. It's been so good. Is there any other things that you maybe want to point out about the album?
Yeah, I think just on that theme of victory and hope, like in Cornerstone, you hear a little bit of the taunt of the world, right? Like he who made
Right.
the key should make us see the door. Like, oh, if this really isn't a fantasy, and if this is real, and in We Will All Rise, like that song just like got me so hyped. And making it as I came to that end part where like we're all screaming together, and it still
Yeah,
gets me hyped. I still like love blasting that, um, because I think in a way it is a sanctified taunt in a way,
right,
in the sense of like someone ask us if it's worth it now, where it's like, oh, that day when we'll be perfect, whole world bowing down in worship. Like that same in the beginning, you were like, oh, like he should show himself. He should, the whole world is going to be bowing down in worship.
right.
Someone ask us if it's worth it now. And so, having come through the whole album and like the ups and downs and the difficulties and like the suffering of being a Christian and walking by faith and not by sight, and feeling the temptation of the enemy. I was just reading First Thessalonians today, in which Paul is like eager to see the Thessalonians because he wants to make sure that the tempter has not tempted them, and that their work
Yeah,
is not in vain, and that they haven't been drawn away. And it's just like all of that, feeling temptation to doubt and to sin, and we do sin and we struggle, and it can be easy on the outside to like to look at the afflictions of the righteous and to be like, is that worth it? And then in
right.
the end, there's this victorious hope of like on that last day when the Lord Jesus returns with all his saints, which Paul also says in First Thessalonians. Um, Someone ask us if it's worth it now, and
Mm,
yeah, it'll be
mm,
a glorious day. And I think that that's just like a when I hear that, like when I write these songs, I'm writing them because I want to feel them too. and
right.
and I when I feel that part. And when I was talking to David, the mixing engineer, I just kept asking. I was like, "Turn that part up!" Like I want to hear them screaming, like to the
Yeah,
point to where like
yeah,
if you do play it, like it does overpower my main vocals. But for me, it's like it's worth it because that is just like I want you to feel that. I want to feel that. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's what I was saying. It was like there was a part of me that was just like, I'm gonna have to talk to Nate, man, because I want some more. I want some more. Like, because at first I was like, whoa, his. Because I was gonna even ask Matt because I don't know nothing about mixing. And I was just, is it supposed to like overpower his voice like that? And then I listened to it a third time. I was like, oh, who cares?
Mm.
Like we're all together, like everything's together, like proclaiming. I'm like, I want my rocks to be loud, like everything is crying out right now, and it's supposed to sound big. And I was just like, oh, that's so good. So I've listened to that song like 15 times, uh, because it's intense, especially like in a car or
Mm.
what. Oh, just mm. Sometimes just headphones don't do it. I gotta have it in the car.
Yeah.
Like I want other people to hear it too.
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I think that that's beautiful. I think that once again, there has been. I think a lot of times in discipleship, when you're talking to other believers and stuff like that, um, like honestly, two people within the last few weeks, kind of like before the project, has been asking this question of, with such rich truth, when does it match my feelings? Like when do I respond? Like how do I even respond? What does that look like? Am I supposed to just kind of sing these other true words about this truth, like
Mm.
in congregational worship, or like am I supposed to feel it? Am
Mhm.
I just supposed to, like, with Terrified, the reason why I liked it so much is because it wasn't just I'm terrified, here's why I shouldn't be, and now I'm not. It didn't it wasn't that it's kind of true like how that worked, but it wasn't just like you wrote it to say here's why you shouldn't be terrified. Bible says, do not fear 365 times. And then, okay, I'm not terrified. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like I am meditating on the truth. Therefore, I might be terrified. Oh, I don't have to be terrified. Oh, I don't have to be terrified.
Mm,
Like, so I think a lot of times with all the different emotions and different things, sometimes it doesn't get there when we have the truth. But in this album, it's like, hey, watch all of them dance. And that answers kind of like the soul part of all of this, like
mm,
how we should respond, how we should, you know, feel and meditate on things.
yeah.
Um, is it hard having a spot where it was just quiet to where it made me feel like I actually could say, yeah, I'm like, yeah, man, Nate, this is hard. And then you say it again, like maybe it was almost like you stopped
Mm,
to like hear if I got it or not. Like,
mm.
is it hard? It might be a little bit hard. Is it hard? Maybe. Is it hard? Oh yeah. Like it's like we had to get there. Like so
Yeah.
that's what I think. Just the whole nature of this album was. It was just like these building and actually dealing with emotion and actually dealing with the truth and actually like having a healthy response to all of it.
Hmm.
So, bro, I commend you on that because I don't think that's easy. I think that's definitely been a blessing from God, and I know a lot of people have said and will be encouraged in hearing this project.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, I think yeah, that definitely speaks to a goal and one that I tried to something that I tried to pray through and carry faithfully because I think sometimes the response to just throwing the truth at an issue, the response is people just we want to run to just like, well, just then I just need to be in my feelings, just express my feelings, and just that's it. And it's like I
Yeah,
wasn't trying to go there where it was like it was just about feeling the feeling. You know what I mean?
right,
Um, but it just does not help to ignore it and to treat it as if it's not uh, meant to be addressed or that the depth of it is not meant to be felt. And I think truth, doctrine, sound teaching is meant to meet those experiences and to speak to them. And so, yeah, I that's something that I just yeah, it's like the Christian experience is a Christian experience, you
right,
know,
right.
um, in which God's truth meets our experiences. Um, and it brings healing and it brings hope. It meets them. Um, you know, just like you think about our weaknesses and our temptations.
Yeah,
Like, why is Jesus a good high priest? Because he experienced weakness and temptation and he can
yes,
sympathize with us. Like it says that
yes,
in Hebrews. And it's when I hear that, I'm like, man, like I need to soak in that, like let my head wrap around that. Like I should be encouraged, not just that God has provided a way of escape, but I should also be encouraged in that Jesus can sympathize with me in my
right.
weakness and my temptation. And that's what makes him a good high priest, that he
And not
became
just
a man.
tolerate it.
What'd you say?
Yeah, and not just like tolerate it. It's
Exactly.
come to me, draw near to me, for I am gentle and lowly. Like what? That's yeah. Um, I also thought that it was really cool where church is
Hmm.
and how everything goes together. Because we've experienced all those emotions, right? We've experienced all these thoughts. We've experienced sin. We've experienced the sweetest fish. Like we've experienced all of that. and now we have a place where other people are doing it too.
Mm,
Like real love, real friends, real hope to the end.
yeah.
Real love, real friends, real family. Like children of the Most High God, the building of a family. Like you're repeating some these things, saying like, "Hey, all that stuff doesn't just stay in here and doesn't just get experienced by yourself. It
Hmm.
actually, boom, is in a church." And I'm glad you actually put that before terrified, because in some sense, if someone is terrified, if somebody is thinking through that, they are doing those things. And when Faithful died and dealing with all that, you shouldn't be dealing with those things alone, because we've already established you're in this school of Neon Tetra.
Yeah. Yeah.
so then, like everybody do that. Now, when we say we will, like that's a we will, not just
Exactly.
you, not
Yeah.
just me over here. We will,
Yeah.
and that's beautiful, man.
Yeah. The Christian life is not a solo experience. And church in particular, I think is meaningful to me because it has come out of a time of like difficulty in which the Lord has like pressed on me the importance of his church. And like the more you just see it in scripture, you realize, like so many verses, so many parts of scripture that I have read and prayed for myself, I go and look at it in context and it's talking to a church. It's talking
Hmm.
to the church. And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, like it's good to apply it to myself. Can I also read and apply these things to us as a body? Because
Right.
when Paul is saying, I'm praying for you, he's like praying for all of them and for their unity and for their hope and for their growth and their love. And Christ is not coming back for an individual, like he's coming back for a church. And
Right.
that is central. It's not just important, it's central to being a Christian is the church. And that's
Yeah.
just become like even more just like crystal clear to me. And obviously we all grow in that and like there's ways in which I could acknowledge that and understand it more. But I just the more that I'm reading scripture and just even under the teaching of my own church and the way that they've encouraged us in that, just recognizing, man, like this is God's plan. Like the mystery
Right.
that's being unveiled is Christ and his bride, which is the
Right.
church. And
The
this is
church.
and like in Ephesians, like the great mystery is like bringing together Jew and nations, Jew and Gentile. Um, and that's the great mystery is us being
Right.
brought together in Christ.
In Christ.
And so yeah, just church, that that word is just becoming more and more like being meaningful to me. And so it was an important part of the album because this really could have been very easily been like a individual Christian experience kind of thing.
Oh
And
yeah,
I just
for
think
sure, for
the
sure.
Lord is just like pressing my heart more and more the more that I see it in scripture, especially that just like this is this is way more than that. Like his plan is way bigger than that. And what's glorious about it is every tribe, tongue, and nation worshiping and bowing before Christ. And then I think as a second point, you mentioned Swedish fish, and I feel like this might be helpful just to tell people that it's sort of a creative way of saying what's said in Psalm 119, where David says, "Your word to me is sweeter than honey."
Mm.
It's just a creative, like modern way of saying, like, to know you, Lord. Like, there's nothing sweeter than this. And Swedish fish just happened to be like one of my favorite candies as a kid. And then it's a fish, and the album,
Right.
the neon, like it all
It ain't
just
no
kind of.
Neon Tetra.
I know we just need a diet kind of blue on top. Um, so yeah, that was kind of what's behind that. But yeah, man,
Yeah.
those are the primary things that have been on my heart with a lot of it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is so good. And you know a project's good too when it's just there's so much to draw from.
Mm.
Like I feel like we could have took like maybe a few songs and spent the same amount of time trying to talk through it. Um, but yeah, I think that this was by far. I don't even want to just blow a lot of smoke or whatever, but it is really encouraging to my soul to be able to have an album like this and just get me through.
Mm.
Um, and it's not, it's kids like it.
Mm.
That's so
Yeah,
helpful for
honestly, I
me.
love that
Uh,
about it.
yeah. Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know you got to go write some more music for me.
Not right
And
now.
I'm just
Taking that
kidding.
break.
I'm just kidding. Listen. A proper response that is spiritual and good and wise is rest. So,
Yeah.
so if you pop out another one, I'll be surprised. But rest is definitely good.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's so much in this one. We don't need to rush for another one. Uh,
Thanks, brother. I appreciate you being willing to
yeah,
do this. And
yeah,
yeah, it's been a good conversation. Your questions were super helpful and thinking through the project and getting to share a little bit more of the thought behind everything, the behind the scenes and all that.